Probably most of you will know, but for those who don't, my name's Louise Fluker and I'm the Vice Chair of the Richmond Society and Chair of its Planning Committee. And our subject this evening is Last Chance for Doughty House. And I imagine that lots of you, if you've wandered up Richmond Hill or you've looked up at the hill from the towpath over the years, have seen this building shrouded in plastic with tears which flap in the wind, revealing scaffolding underneath. Well, the plastic's gone, but you can see the scaffolding. And this evening, well, these are a couple of pictures of its current state. I mean, basically, it's a Georgian mansion which is rotting, and unless something's done fairly soon, it will be irretrievable. So I'm very pleased that we've got a trio of speakers. Tom Appleton from Rocket Developments, who is the developer behind this proposal, James Lloyd, who is a planning expert, and Phil Catchside, who is from the architects Hawkins Brown. And they're going to talk about their proposals and what they want to do. Before doing that, two things. First of all, we've got people on Zoom. Secondly, we record where possible and where the technology permits, which usually it does here, our various events. And so we will put this presentation, with the consent of our speakers, on the Richmond Society's YouTube site for other people to look at. Well, I promise I'm not going to give you a history lesson, or indeed an art history lesson. And it's very easy to be fixed on buildings, but often it's the people behind buildings that make something interesting and make a place interesting. And I think this is particularly true of Doughty House. So, as I've mentioned, it's a Georgian mansion built in 1769 and then acquired in 1786 by Elizabeth Doughty. Now, that might trigger a few bells in your minds. First of all, there's Elizabeth Doughty Almshouse down Queen's Road, which is a new one. But secondly, she provided the funds for building the Catholic Church and Vineyard, St. Elizabeth of Portugal. Moving on, 1849, Francis Cook acquires the house. And he was reputed to be the third richest man in England. And his business, which nobody'd ever heard of, was wholesaling clothes. He didn't apparently manufacture them. But what he did was exploit the railway system, which in the middle of the 19th century was the equivalent of the AI revolution. So he had traveling salesmen who would go out demonstrating their wares. And he was a passionate art collector. And he started his art collection in 1868. And by 1876, he had 510 major works, and I'll show a couple of them shortly. And he had so many that in 1885, he decided to build an art gallery. And you can't actually see it from the hill, but if you look at the building from Thomas's College behind, you can. And by 1913, when I think it was his grandson, catalogued the collection, there were 547 works. Well, the old adage that a fortune's made in the first generation and dispersed by the third, in this case it was probably the fourth. And in the 1930s, in the Depression, the finances, I think, of the firm fell into disrepair. And over the next few years, the collection was dispersed. And here's a picture of Sir Francis and his equally interesting, if not more so, wife, Lady Cook. Now, she's best described as an American adventuress. And she was known as Tennessee Chafflin. She was born into poverty in Ohio, was started by her father, who was peddling sort of nonsense cures, as a clairvoyant and fortune teller and healer. And she and her sister then eventually escaped to New York, formed the first female brokerage firm in 1870, backed by Cornelius Vanderbilt, who was reputed to be her lover. That got hammered. And they also were suffragists, so they were great promoters of rights for women, and they kept trying to stand for election and being turned down. And they also ran a radical newspaper, which was the first one in America, apparently, to print the Communist Manifesto. Anyway, she scarpers from America and arrives in the UK and becomes Lady Cook and leads a life of great respectability thereafter. Now, this is a picture from the family collection, and you can see some of the pictures that they had on display. And these are a couple of, I thought I'd just show you some of the things, because this isn't just any old collection of stuff. This was old masters of the First Order. So on the far left is the Adoration of the Magi by Fra Angelico and Filippo Lippi, and it dates from about 1445, and it's now in the National Gallery of Art in Washington. And on the right is the Three Marys at the Sepulchre by Jan van Eyck, which is now in the Beuningen Museum in Amsterdam. And just a few more. The one on the left, which if any of you go to the National Gallery in Scotland, you will see is Velázquez's Old Woman Cooking Eggs. And on the right, which you may be less familiar with, is a portrait by Titian of a woman called Laura Dianti. And she, just to add to the general amusement, was the third wife of the Duke of Ferrara, succeeding Lucretia Borgia. So Francis had very good taste and was in fact advised by somebody from the V&A. And last but not least, this is attributed, well, it has now had the imprimatur of the National Gallery as being a Leonardo, Salvator Mundi. So this actually lived in Richmond for a time being. But it was in the catalogue in 1905 as a copy. So when the collection was dispersed, it was sold by Sotheby's for £45 in 1945. It was sold, I think, in 2017 or thereabouts, for 450 million by Christie's. It is, I have to say, a matter of some controversy, because apparently not all art experts actually believe that it is by Leonardo. But anyway, you might be pleased to know it lived in Richmond for a bit. Anyway, following on from that, fairly quickly, the slide speaks for itself, really. But I think it's probably fair to say that from 1960 onwards, although it was occupied, it started to decline. And by 1999, it's on the Heritage, Historic England now, Heritage at Risk register, both the house and the gallery. And then we moved to 2013, and some of you may remember adverts and things by a group called K10, who are developers. And there was a big feature in the Evening Standard that this was going to be developed into a mansion for a single occupancy and restored, and it was going to cost 64 million, and they were going to sell it for 100 million. And it was all going to be done by 2019. Well, that went well, didn't it? And since then, the house and the gallery are rapidly deteriorating. Now, this was taken in 2016 by a chap who specializes in going into decrepit buildings. And that doesn't look too bad, but you can see it's sort of decaying. Now, some of us from the trustees of Richmond Society were kindly invited by these three to actually go into Doughty House, which we did a few months ago. And the deterioration, which you will see from them, from the photos I've just shown you, is stark. So this, I think, really is the last chance for Doughty House. So without further ado, may I introduce Tom Appleton on the far left, James Lloyd in the middle, and Phil Catchside on the right. And over to them. So here's the clicker.
Well, thank you, Louise. I've learned a lot from that. Very interesting. I'm afraid the rest of the presentation is not anywhere near as interesting as that. It's a little bit more factual. My name's Tom Appleton for a company called Rocket Developments. We've been building residential schemes, hotels, offices for about the past 25 years. And more recently, we've pivoted to more local developments, more small-scale residential developments, which we can care more about. I live in the borough of Richmond myself, so I've known this area for a long time. I'm very familiar with Doughty House. And I think what we're going to show you today is the way that we can rescue it and turn it into something that people want.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. My name's James Lloyd from JLA Limited. We're a town and country consultancy based in Richmond. I also am a local resident. I'd like to say that we've done a number of schemes, particularly in this borough and in Richmond, particularly with listed buildings. So this is one that's always been on my radar, particularly going up the hill. So, for me personally, it's quite a privilege actually to be working on this and with Tom. I hope when you see this, you'll get a flavour of not only the existing condition of the property, but what our aspirations are, which hopefully could be shared with everybody else. Anyway, over to you.
Thanks, James. Phil Catchside from Hawkins Brown Architects. In fact, I grew up in Richmond, so I know Richmond well. Also, from an architectural perspective, we're a practice. We work across a lot of sectors and work a lot with historic buildings. So it was very interesting to start working with Tom and Rocket Developments to see how Doughty House could be brought back into, brought back to life, essentially. So I'm looking at this way at a smaller screen. I may occasionally have to point out one or two things with a laser, so it might be a bit of a swiveling action, but I'll probably go through the slides and then, of course, maybe questions at the end, and we can maybe delve into a bit more detail. We have a relatively brief presentation. We're trying to keep the broad themes, but we can talk in more detail if there are questions. Probably don't really need to introduce its location, key location on Richmond Hill, but going, one of the main assets of the house is its location in relation to the terraces below and the famous view, of course, internal view here. This is the house under its tin roof, essentially, which is protecting deterioration of the fabric of the main house and the gallery. And you're probably familiar with this, having being local to it. It's been wrapped up to protect as much as possible, but the interiors are some way a great deal degraded from those pictures that we just saw a few moments ago from 2016. These few photographs here give a bit of an indication of its current state. In fact, this was last year. So almost all of the plaster is off the walls, so the masonry is exposed. Lots of ceiling has been removed in years gone by, and chimney breasts, etc., and paneling has virtually disappeared from most, if not all, rooms. So it's quite a state. Even those, the entrance hall areas with the metalwork, etc., from the 2016 photos, that it's not representative really of its current condition. Really just a few historic, photograph in one case and pictures in the other. Actually, top left picture is pre-Doughty House, but shows the Richmond Hill and the terracing. And so, Doughty House was added to a well-established pattern of development. On the right there, you can see Doughty House with its conservatory, which is now missing. But you can see there, and it's just interesting to note on that one, it's forward of the main line of Doughty House itself. I'll carry on. Essentially, the planning history, recent planning history has included a pre-application meeting with Richmond where a scheme proposal was discussed, which included conversion of the main house into apartments and the gallery also, and new build in the rear of the property within the grounds and the garden. That proposal included up to 33 dwellings within the overall, within the grounds, all of the buildings combined. And feedback from that has been taken on board. Feedback from Richmond officers taken on board to develop the new proposals, which we're about to show you. But the principle, I suppose, of an apartment-based approach to conversion of the main house and the rest of the buildings was agreed in principle by the borough. Prior to that, this is the planning. This is the consent for the single dwelling. So that's going back many years now, and as mentioned, this was the the sort of £100 million house, which essentially the market is it's a lot of money, £100 million house.
Well, it's probably just worth jumping in there, if I may. It reads for itself. There was an article in the Evening Standard, and I think there's a certain amount of perhaps a bit of hubris about trying to build a great big palace in Richmond, and I'm not entirely sure this property warranted it really. And also, there's no real market for a £100 million house on top of Richmond Hill, but there is for a subdivision of circa 19-20 units there.
It's worth mentioning also that there's extensive basements as part of this proposal were granted. So we've come really to Doughty House with fresh eyes, and we recognise two things. One is the character of the building itself, Georgian spaces within it we want to let the house breathe, and the first the way we can do that is recognise and appreciate the spaces as they currently, or as they were initially intended. So that's large rooms throughout the house, actually, but particularly on the first floor, or the upper ground floor. And in fact, approaching the house in a way that is trying to reveal and rejuvenate that character of the house is actually is a sensible thing from a marketing perspective, because if you want to live in Doughty House, you want to enjoy those aspects of the original architecture, the grand spaces, the architectural details that were in the original house. Now, we've tried to make in this proposal that be affected by having duplexes, essentially two-story houses or two-story dwellings for the lower ground and ground floor, so that you have the same approach as you would have for the main house if it's a single dwelling as it was originally designed, and you share the experience of walking in and out of the house through the main steps onto the upper ground, and have those main spaces, the key grander living spaces, maintained as much as possible. And so the approach really is to, because the house did have rear extensions, and that has been there for many years, and also with the consented scheme, those were reused, having those parts of the building and the proposals to provide the service, if you like, would provide the facilities to service those main dwellings, so that we're, as far as possible, we're building new kitchens outside of those grand spaces, so that you don't interrupt them with a sort of island unit for a kitchen. And so that's the principle that we've taken. We've also got two-story dwellings proposed on the upper floors, combined with single-story flats. But essentially, the number of dwellings proposed in the main house, but across all of the grounds, has dropped to, I think we're looking at about circa 19. So we're significantly lower in total number, and I think we've got 5 or 6 within the main house. Now, we're at an early stage a relatively early stage of finalizing those designs, but the principles hold that we're trying to do, well, fundamentally create a more value and therefore bring Doughty House back to life with fewer dwellings, but higher quality dwellings, and ones which can respect and enhance and rejuvenate those original spaces within the house. I realise I've talked for a long time to rather boring plans there, but we can come back to those and we can go into maybe more detail. So that's really our approach to the main house. There's a similar approach really to the gallery. The gallery itself, it was a purpose-built gallery for quite a spectacular collection which was built up. The principle that we're taking here is to, again, enjoy the space that's created. It's a very unusual space. There are larger volumes within that gallery, which wouldn't necessarily be within a different, a residential or a house that was purpose-built for that. But if we can essentially convert the gallery, it's all of the gallery detailing, the ceilings, etc., are practically gone. Yeah.
We should mention as well the mosaics from Pompeii that are in there as well. But we're not entirely sure, and maybe Louise, you can tell us if it's true or not, if these mosaics are actually from Pompeii.
Yeah.
So we're not sure.
Yeah.
But they're being preserved anyway.
Yeah. And in fact, the upper parts of the gallery are in a similar state of disrepair or degradation as the main house, whereas actually the corridor, if you like, which is it's got a lot of stone detailing on the ground floor, is actually in a pretty good state compared to the rest of the house. So we're using that. Again, there's a sort of logic to using those parts of the building which give the grandeur, give the sense of this building as a special place which was built for an artistic collection, or an art collection rather, and maintaining that as the main access corridor for dwellings which are designed in fewer dwellings with larger spaces occupying that large space. So that essentially you have some understanding when you are living in these new dwellings that you are a part of a larger space and it was a gallery. That's a key part of the attraction really for anybody living in this gallery, in this development, and also maintains that historical link with its previous use. And so these are some of the plans just showing how we've gone about our thinking in the first case with the gallery, and there's a cross-section through the building showing how we're trying to inhabit the larger spaces on the first floor. You can see the sort of scale of them compared to the ground floor, and work with those spaces and make sure they're visible when you are living in the converted dwellings. And moving on to the conservatory, this is a picture showing the conservatory as it was next to the house. And it's, of course, not there anymore, but it's part of the consented massing. So and it's part of the character of the house historically. It had been there on the house's journey, if you like, through history. We are working within the existing consented envelope, but we're looking to create dwellings within that conservatory, as did the created residential floor space within the conservatory, and to not necessarily reproduce exactly, but have very similar architectural detailing to the original conservatory. That gives us the opportunity here with some basement accommodation with light wells dropping through to have quite an unusual and really quite characterful dwelling here, with views, of course, across Richmond Hill and across the river. So quite a bit of a one-off, this dwelling proposed here. We're also with the conservatory here, trying to make sure that we can link the duplex apartments, or the two-story dwelling that we're proposing within the main house, and give some of that conservatory space to that dwelling, so that actually the conservatory is linked to the main house, and those residents can enjoy the part of the conservatory as part of their amenity space, if you like, their as an adjacent space to their house. These are new dwellings proposed at the rear of the gallery and of the grounds of the house. The consented footprint, there was a consented footprint for a new dwelling, for new residential floor space in the existing consent for a single dwelling. The previous discussions with the council officers was looking at a larger development at the rear in terms of footprint, but we have come back and reduced that proposal here to what we're calling sort of Mews House type. Now, it's not directly accessible in the way that the Mews might be from fully from a street, but there is a pattern of development for the rear of this house, but adjacent houses, and historically there would be smaller dwellings to the rear which had other functions, and that's certainly the case in the adjacent houses along the terrace. So we're trying to use that as a way to have an understanding of how we might build in a sympathetic way to the rear of the gallery. It was a very particular architectural expression. We're trying to give something that's different, but has is not significantly taller. We're trying to respect the height, massing of the gallery, so that we don't overwhelm it. And of course, there are neighbours either side and to the rear to consider, of course. But these are just they're really sketches. So these are visualizations which we're using as design tools, essentially. So these, we wouldn't normally be showing these at this sort of stage of consultation, and the danger here is that people take this away as a sort of fixed design. It certainly isn't. It's a way for us to explore how we might deal with materiality and form, etc., and create a place that we can start to understand as being different from the existing condition, which you can see on the left, which is very overgrown. It's very hard to understand where buildings start and finish, even with the sort of amount of growth within the garden currently. So another one of those sort of very, well, the sketches really, but they show, this one here shows the reverse view, looking from the, as we call them, the sort of Mews houses, looking back towards the rear of the main house, and that's where we are reinstating some of the previous extensions to the main house, but again looking to understand how that might have a relationship with the gallery. The gallery is obviously a stone-clad building, but the rear of the house is brick. The front of the house is stone, of course. And again, on the left-hand side, this is sort of the condition with the overgrown garden, the semi-demolished and deteriorating rear of the main house, which are the later extensions, and of course the protective roof over it. So again, we're using these to fire some design synapses in our brain to work out how we can reimagine the space. So that's the sort of process we've gone through in terms of the external grounds and buildings around them. And we're doing the same thing here to imagine what a essentially refurbished internal space might look like. And on the, again, top left is its condition currently. Might even, I think that might be, it is exactly the same part of the building, but a slightly different view, and I think it might be a couple of years old now. But you can see internally what we're trying to do is reimagine that main space, which is actually, in this case, is one of the grandest spaces within Doughty House. So this is sort of on the western side of the main stairs on the upper ground floor. And really try and bring that back to life and imagine how somebody might live in that space, in a contemporary way, but all of the, the bones of the building, if you like, the architectural bones, are of a period, essentially, of its period, because really that's, not many of these come along. Doughty House is quite, well, if not unique, but it's certainly one of its kind. And that's what we want to bring out from the building and the designs we're developing. So I think I maybe rattled through that even quicker than I was expecting to. But that's giving, hopefully...
I just want to pitch in on a planning point on this. People should be aware that the 2016 scheme is actually an extant consent, i.e. it could theoretically be delivered. So there is a blueprint that we've looked on from a design team in terms of what we can capitalize on, utilize to ensure a viable, feasible scheme. We've got to be mindful that this is a listed building. It's on a register, it's at risk, and as you'll see from the existing photographs, the deterioration is far worse than you could imagine. And, we're now in summer, but by winter, particularly with the rain in the winter, it gets worse. From that perspective, this is effectively enabling development or heritage enabling development. And so what we've been tasked to do is to ensure that we can actually bring back to use or bring back to life a viable and feasible scheme. And there's a balance here. I wouldn't say there's a trade-off. We have to respect and pay homage to what we've got. This is the beginning of the process. I say that, Tom will laugh, but, how long has it been, a year and a bit?
No, it's probably been close to 2.
Oh, I'm worth every penny, Tom. From that perspective, though, just to see where we are in terms of planning. So we've had a series of initial high-level meetings with the council. We have an agreed planning performance agreement, or a PPA, if you're aware of that is. And we are in the stages of presenting schemes to them now to agree design. The principle, as Tom's alluded to, in terms of having the idea of a flattest scheme has been broadly agreed, and therefore now we're trying to work out the detail of how that works. Tom, do you want to add to that?
No, I think that's it really. Thanks, Phil, for running through all of that. We're here for any questions, answers you may have. Is this the appropriate time? Yep.
Right, well, we've got a couple of roving mics. So we'll take, there's a question here.
Thanks very much, Councillor Seamus Joyce. Could you describe, based in the building we're in, the size of the gallery approximately? How big would the gallery be in relation to this building?
It's probably, in terms of height, it's not quite as high as here. You're probably up to about, I'd say the last speaker up there probably, so the 1, 2, 3, 4 vents, I think it is. In terms of meters, Phil, do you know what it is in meters? It's basically a 3-story house.
Yeah, I mean, it's not quite as, and it's not as deep. So, one, if I can go back to maybe one of those sections, I'm not sure I got the right one on here, but it's, yeah.
I'll tell you how you could visualize it. It's probably 3 squash courts in a row. That's probably the best way I can think of it.
Okay. And my follow-up question is, would you be open to the suggestion, maybe, of the Richmond Museum moving into the gallery?
Well, I mean, everything has an economic appraisal against it. So if that becomes the highest and best use, that's certainly something we could consider. I mean, currently, the most economic use for the building is to return it into residential.
That's what it's got consent for.
Yeah,
it is resi. There are vast voids within this building, and we have tried to look to how we can capitalize, whether that could be community-led, for whatnot. We are doing that exercise. Just be mindful, it's resi, there's a cost aspect to it in terms of, how would that work? What's the relationship then with the proposed residential? How would we then get servicing access arrangements to it and whatnot? So it's something that we've considered, it's something that we've discussed. as I say, there's a cost element to it. So I wouldn't say no, but at this present time, this is a residential-led scheme.
I think it's worth pointing out that the number of original features in the building is, I mean, there are hardly any left. The best view is through the front door, and there's a splendid staircase that goes up. But vandals have got in, pigeons have got in, fireplaces have been removed, all the decorative features that you would expect in a grand house have largely gone.
Yep.
Right, next question.
Councillor Penny Frost. Is this working?
Yep.
And my ears pricked up certainly at the thought of any kind of community use being incorporated into the design of the building, because it is a splendid position, and it's one that there would always be an opportunity for quid pro quo really on enabling a little bit of community use, and the Richmond Museum is certainly something which would love to have an opportunity to have some rehousing. But my question very quickly, one of the designs that you showed, did I see bedrooms down in a basement area?
Yeah, I think you were referring to this one.
Yes,
the
that
conservatory.
one.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, how is that? Because I'm just aware that there's a lot of, we've got underground streams coming down the hill there and run off down into the river. I'm just a bit concerned about seeing underground or basement bedrooms. Thank you.
Yeah, there's, you're right to point that out. There's actually 2 wells on the site as well. And this doesn't affect them. The previous consent actually did interfere with the well, so we're not digging down across the main site. In here, there is a small amount of excavation, but across the whole site, we're just leaving it at the ground grade because of the wells.
But you've got runoff from rivers as well. You have got underground rivers going down there, down into the Thames. You need to be absolutely sure that you know.
You are correct. You have to be mindful of the 2016 extent consent that had a basement, so that level of detail, that technical work has been done. It's dated, I appreciate that, but in terms of the next phase of how the scheme will develop, we do have to explore that. But we understand from the previous consent that there's a possibility to do it.
Right, okay.
Shall I? I'll go first, shall I?
Senator James started out.
No.
I find
Sorry.
it.
Oh.
2 competing microphones.
Sorry.
Ladies start it, then we'll come to you.
Thank you. I've got 2 questions, one tactical, one rather more strategic. Could you just speak to the parking very quickly? And then could you also, from your 3 perspectives, what do you think are the biggest risks to the success of this project? And finally, I think it's great. I love it.
Well, let me start with the easy one. The parking is basically 1 space per unit, so I think we've got 19 spaces in there.
Yeah.
We're also going to put in 3 EV spaces for the rest of the mini estate, if you like. They can just be booked on a daily basis. So that's the parking. What's the biggest risk? Well, we've got quite a long list, actually. I mean, the problem with these buildings is once you start going into them and opening them up, there's risks that you didn't know were there. Not just the fireplaces have been taken out, but the chimney breasts have been taken out, not by us, by the predecessors. So there's a structural risk there. I mean, the building's actually falling away from its neighbour at the moment, so we've got some various supports, temporary supports for that. I mean, there's various structural risks in the old house. The gallery's not terribly bad. It's a much later building, so the floor's okay in there. So that's the structural stuff. Politically, we're working with Richmond Council to get the planning that suits everybody, and with English Heritage or Heritage England, who have been round already. And then I suppose there's a market risk that people want to buy it. Now, we've done our own research on that. We wouldn't have got this far without. So I've given you 3 risks there. The biggest one, it's always going to be unknown construction. And what you take something down, you think is there, isn't actually there. There's more stuff there.
I'll go next. In terms of parking, I mean, look, we're on the hill, and the units we're revising, there has to be a balance between how much parking can we provide, particularly with family dwellings, and which market we're catering for. That's why when you saw the number of units from the original proposal down to 19, one is we're trying to make them oversized units to be more luxurious and spacious. That respects the listed building in itself. The second part then is, of course, you need some breathing space or amenity space. You've got the hill and you've got the park in close proximity, but you do need some usable, defendable space that you do. So I think we're getting the balance right between the number of car parking that we need to do it. So I think 19 spaces, particularly with sustained electric points, that's good. In terms of from a planning perspective, biggest risks currently is this enabling development from a heritage aspect. In terms of the more you look at this building or pick away at it, you do question that, you put fingers crossed how it's still standing up to date, if I'll be honest, particularly with the building at risk and where you look at the risk factors are, particularly with the roof in the main gallery and then the main building itself. So it's just a question of how much can be salvaged, how much needs to be reused in order to make a viable, feasible scheme. And this is it. It's a balance between form and function, viability, feasibility. And that's probably, from a planning point of view, although I think I'm comfortable that the principle's good because it's exam consent resi, it's just the quality of resi that puts forward, and then the management plan to support that. Because ultimately, you get a consent, you do it, there has to be an element of future-proofing for proposed or future tenants that actually have to keep looking after the building as well. So we've just got to be mindful of that. It's like a legacy. You think about what now, and then you've got to think in 15, 20, 25 years' time that hopefully the existing tenants will look after it with perpetuity.
I think they've covered pretty much everything there. I'd just say from a parking perspective, it's one for one that they are accommodated within the landscaping and in the rear. There is actually the access, which is already there, which has been built as part of the original consent, which is, so that's, that takes you in underneath the gallery and through into the courtyard behind, and also the biggest risk. I mean, I think it's condition of the building. It's hard to remember a building which has been in such a state of repair everywhere. So uncovering that and working out all the architectural details to bring that back up to back into life is going to be a challenge. Sorry.
I'm a chartered architect, and I find it difficult to apprehend how a great house with great historical meaning is rather than transferred into more community use, museum, and stripped up of its glory and divided into multi-small dwellings, because in this way a lot of detail which could have been preserved could disappear, and there are a lot of... In Richmond, I find that there is probably a lot need of a community use, museum, or a purpose where a lot of people could get together. And I wonder, it's probably more financial, which has taken over, in order to make money out of the small dwellings, with a lot of problems probably when you have a large, beautiful historical house, rather than restore it and transfer it into community use.
I think there are probably a lot of people who've got questions. So I think summarising.
The question is how the decision was taken to go this way.
Well, I think probably the best one to concentrate on is the Doughty House itself. It was originally split into, sort of circa 8 or 9 units, that were perhaps a bit smaller. We've now got just 5 units, and they're quite big on the ground floor, then there's 2 more and 2 more. And then I think the point is here that the individual owners of Doughty House, parts thereof, can experience the grandeur of the house by all joining in the same park, going up the grand staircase. In terms of hiding bits of the building that's already there, there's nothing there. There's a few bits that you'll see in this picture here which are being preserved. So all the bits that we can preserve are being preserved, and the bits that aren't there are going to be reinstated as they should have been for the people who are in the units to enjoy. So I think...
Maybe they have been photographs from the past, surely, so that one can go back.
There are photographs from the past, but I think the position is I can't speak for the developers, but we are where we are. Having been inside the house, I can assure you that there are virtually no original features.
I can answer that question. We've got tons of photographs. As part of this presentation, when it's circulated, we will give you the latest photographs we've got, and you can see for your own eyes that current state. We've also commissioned an existing buildings report. That's still to be finalised. But the photos, when you see them, I think they paint a picture for themselves.
Can I raise a question? Well, it's a series of points, actually, as rather than a question. Firstly, I strongly support what you're doing. I think, secondly, any development in Richmond has got to make commercial sense. So I think if these guys are taking the risk, it has made commercial sense. I'd like to make a point to the councillors here about using it as a community. I went around this house when it was previously sold, and the previous owners ripped out the staircases, ripped out everything, and you did nothing to protect it. There's a series of other houses in Richmond. There's one down on Peacham Road. So talking about your good and great way of preserving Richmond, there's many houses in Richmond which have been let to deteriorate badly over your watch. And there's multiple houses. So I applaud these guys. I support these guys. Yes, there's planning issues, but you need to encourage people like this to save these impressive houses rather than talk about using it as a community centre, because community centres, they have not got any money, because if they had money, they would sort out the house on Peacham Road, they'd sort out other houses, and they are powerless to do that. So I applaud you guys. Please, wrestle with planners. I've been wrestling with planners for many, many years, and you've been very, very polite, and I wish you luck, but there comes a point where this will not happen if the planners do not agree to it being a commercial development, and it will sit there and rot because the council will do nothing to put their hand in their pocket to protect it. So I wish you amazing luck. And
Thank you.
I'm happy to take questions on how to help with the planning.
Thank you very much. I mean, some people do think we're crazy, but we do think we're doing the right thing. So thank you for that.
There's one element I do want to touch on. As the scheme progresses, when you look in the main gallery, the existing corridor, the access that would lead into the units, will actually be retained to actually represent the gallery. From that perspective, we will actually pay homage to it. There are loads of elements. It's been stripped out radically, but there are bits that we will, if have to be kept, they will be kept. Let's be clear.
The scrolls down there,
Yeah.
I've seen them in there. It was ripped apart by the previous owners, and you did nothing to protect it. So let these guys please protect it.
Okay, I think you've made your point, which is registered loud and clear now. Paul Venaway at the back.
A couple of points, spark questions. It's a long time since I walked the rooftop of the property when I was project architect for the reconstruction of the house next door back in '75 and before the terrace. I've always been puzzled by the absence of any structure behind that great pediment with the oculus window in it. Do you have any ambitions at roof level to exploit what is a very deadly roofscape up there at the present time and make sense of that huge great pediment? And I would certainly welcome it, remove the whole thing so that it reinstates some of the Georgian quality of the building, the original building. Secondly, I haven't seen any drawings yet of the relationship between the house, the mews at the far end, and the gallery. Do you have a plan which one can understand readily, the spaces that are left over after you've developed at the back? The relationship between each of the component parts.
If I can go to a plan, I mean, we don't have an overall plan. Well, actually, we've got one at the beginning, but this will give some sense of where the new build on the right-hand side of this slide, where essentially where it's not green, that's where we're proposing to make the mews houses, as we call them, and that captures the whole of the site. So apologies, we haven't got that plan. I don't think in sufficient detail to point at now. I'm just going to go back to the.
Well, whilst you're doing that, I'll pick up on the Oculus windows. It's an interesting one because I didn't actually realise there wasn't anything behind it until we'd started this process. I just assumed there was, and it's a bit of a curiosity. The previous consent actually used the space between the two pitches for a sort of mini roof terrace. We haven't done that yet, and we probably don't need to. The jury's out a bit, really, because it doesn't go anywhere, the round window. It just sort of sits there as a sort of little accoutrement to the buildings, which it's probably not quite necessary. But I thought it was originally part of the building. Is it not? Okay.
Gentleman back.
Alan Saunders. It sounds an exciting project, but I think also an expensive project. So therefore, can we talk a bit about the financing and therefore the developer? Can you tell us something about your company, the strength of your balance sheet? Because so many of these projects do fall down because funding collapses at some stage, and we wouldn't want another failed development project. It does sound so good. I'm sure we all want to encourage you, but can you give us a little more visibility on the finances?
Yeah, well, we'll start with the costing. So we've had it costed by our quantity surveyors and costed by 2 builders as well. So we're confident in the price. And in terms of where that throws out the revenue, there's a suitable enough gap for it to be a worthwhile project to do. We've had the advice from local agents on sales, and we've put various voids in there for sales gaps, etc. So in terms of the economics, we're fine. I think you also asked a question about balance sheet. We got this one funded with another scheme that we're doing in another part of London, so it's sort of cross between the funding. That's more of a new build scheme, and the funding was agreed with that about 2 months ago. So once the planning comes through, it's quite a quick route to site. Once the planning comes through, it's quite a quick route to get to site. So there's no additional approvals needed, such as Gateway Acts or anything. It's straightforward.
Thank you, gentlemen. I have a question. Could you be crystal clear about how cars will access the site? We're having a vivid debate, having been vineyard parents, and so just crystal clear on that.
Yeah. It's so if I could describe it, I don't know if there's a picture on here somewhere, but
could you point on the map there with your gorgeous laser?
I don't know.
You can see this where this isn't the exact plan.
If I go to there, so. Oops.
I think for me it would be easier if you showed that original picture.
Say again, sir?
As local residents, since we walked past, could you use the picture you had when you started speaking and just point to where cars will come in to the site? Thank you.
So that was the aerial plan, I think you meant.
You just passed it again.
I did.
One more time.
Okay.
And one more. Yeah.
Yeah,
stop.
that one. Okay. On that one. That's not the exact plan.
Do you want to show on the laser?
Yeah. So essentially, as a part of this consent, a new access was provided here, which takes you underneath. In fact, that was the old garage.
Nowhere near the primary school, for example. That's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Right, yeah. Between the hotel and the house.
Yeah, quick question. I'd first declare an interest. I actually own the house next door that you say it's falling away.
I'm meaning to come over to you.
So I'm sure you're going to contact me at some point. But in terms of the development, my understanding, obviously the property's been owned by Cordwell or some of his companies, almost since the start, and obviously K10 fell out. So it's my understanding that you are going to do the development by yourself rather than being a joint development with him, and you
That's
can
correct.
do that.
We've agreed
progress.
to buy it off the Coldwell Group, and then we will just be doing the development as a rocket development scheme.
I mean, I think something along the lines that you're proposing is the only thing that makes commercial sense up there. I think there's, obviously, with what's happened at Star and Garter and Ancaster House opposite, and then there's been 2 properties sold for close to 10 million along the road. So I think that sort of size and maybe amount of development could potentially work. But I think the other point about it is protection of the building. I know you've been very kind to the current owner, but there's nothing that would have stopped them from having security on the property or putting up proper boarding or not tearing the stuff out or anything like that.
Yeah, it's a bit of a delicate situation with the Coldwell Group as well, because we complete on the purchase post the planning. So during this particular period right now, we have to keep telling them to increase the security, to increase the protection, including your own building next door. Whilst they do some of it, they probably don't do as much as we would do if we had the full control at the moment. But I take that on board, and I will go back to them on that.
You're right next door to a big hotel who have a kind of history of scuppering things. What's their attitude, or do you not have to worry about them?
Well, we've had a decent relationship. Then we've even had the planning meetings in their conference suite. And then the hotel on the other side of that one, the harbour one, we were going to do some reciprocal memberships, and not reciprocal, some group memberships, whereby the buyers of the flats get to use their health spa. So they're quite keen to do that. But if you mean the immediately next door hotel, we haven't had anything that I know about of them trying to scupper things.
No.
But do tell me if you hear, because we'll go and speak to them.
Right, this gentleman in the front.
Okay.
Ian Bruce.
Hello, I'm Dermot Kelly, yet another councillor. Newly elected, only 6 weeks in the post, so delighted to be here. And, you know, I basically am not culpable for any of the attack that was made on the council earlier. But my question to you is about the role of English heritage, given that you're saying that a lot of the heritage artefacts, the original artefacts, etc., are no longer there. What is the clout of English heritage in the whole process of getting planning?
So we undertook an initial high-level pre-app with the local authority to start with. It was then recommended by ourselves to conjoin that to have the same time with Historic England. So we are, during our PPA process, or Planning Performance Agreement, we are having a twinned joint pre-app process. So every scheme or iteration we go, it then goes to Heritage England, and then they will review it. They've already been on site. We've already had a response in terms of what they're interested in and what aspects we need to look at more sensitively. Will be designed into the scheme, and then they will get a finished scheme, so to speak, in terms of where we are, for hopefully in a formal final response, and then we would submit. So
what power does English heritage have?
It depends on, at this present time, they have a, I wouldn't say an invested interest, but they have a scope to take a look. They're interested in what we're doing because it's a building at risk. There are elements of the building at risk that they want to be managed and corrected, and that's what we have to focus on. In terms of the overall scheme, they're broadly aligned with what we're proposing. They accept it's a residential use. A residential scheme will help enable that as long as we ensure that the heritage sensitivities are continued going forward.
Ian Bruce.
First of all, thank you very much for the panel for coming along. I think that augurs well for a constructive dialogue in the future. And Louise, thank you for your history, which I think most of us found fascinating. It occurs to me there must be a lot more history on that site than just going back to when that building started. In the process of any development, will there be opportunities for archaeologists or historians to have some access to the site to gain information that will not therefore ever be possible again, probably for another 50, 100 years?
Yeah, I mean, normally we would engage with BOMAS, Museum of London Archaeological Society study. We're not actually doing much excavation here. I mean, what we're dealing with is what's actually there already. In terms of refurbishing the main house, the gallery, and the new build. I mean, there will be a little bit of foundation work in the new build where there's probably going to be conditioned a watching brief, I would have thought.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll discuss the watching brief, please.
So, correct. So there'll probably likely be a condition attached to any consent that should we get permission. There'll be a scoping opinion to start with where any works that we would do have to be looked at. So it'll be a desk-based assessment to start with. Subject to the findings of that, you have to remember that a lot of that's already been done from the exact consent in 2016, so that we may have to finish it off, so to speak, in terms of what works or whatever work they got to. But that will certainly be factored in. To what extent, that does need to be agreed with the local authority. But because we're not doing a basement, there shouldn't be any major intrusive work, apart from foundation work, as Tom said.
Hello. I've read that there's a charge against the property of £4.5 million. I don't know if that's a myth, but if not, I wondered what that is.
Well, so we've agreed to buy post-planning permission the property of the Coldwell Group, and the Coldwell Group will have a charge on it for that amount.
Well, I think the plans are fantastic, and I'd like to say, could you move on to Wick House next? Please.
That's right, we're not. We've had a look down Terrace Lane, and you know, there's a very big level change from Terrace Lane back into this site. I mean, it's about 3 metres or so, it's pretty huge. And it doesn't really warrant another access. We've got the access that we just described before for the cars, and that's all it needs.
Over here. Beverly.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask how the, sorry if I can't see it on the plan, but how the little cottage building that's currently there that's sitting behind what is the proposed conservatory, how that fits into it all? Sorry if I can't read the plan, it's there.
Yes, so we, in order to be brief, we probably passed over that, but I'm going to try and explain what our proposals will be. But essentially, we are looking to convert that into a single dwelling, and that would be accessed separately to the main house, and then be accessed separately to the conservatory dwelling. So, I mean, the cottage itself was built as a sort of adjunct to the...
It's worth saying as well, the cottage has suffered more than the rest of the estate, if you like, because the cottage doesn't have a little tin hat like everyone else does. So the rain's gone through there, so that will be comprehensively redeveloped.
Yeah, so but a single dwelling essentially, and from an architectural perspective, the facade retention, because it's got presence, which is characterful in its own right, but the internal arrangement is a bit of a mess. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Assuming you get planning permission, how long do you envisage that construction or development will take? And what will that entail in terms of potential closure of the roads that sort of are adjacent to the property?
Well, in terms of construction, our programme from the contractor we've got is 18 months. And then if you look down the side, we've got access down there, so we don't have to close Richmond Hill itself. The side entrance has actually already been redeveloped, so that's the site access. In terms of if there are going to be any temporary road closures for scaffolding, possibly. We haven't actually got that far of detail yet.
Hello. We're all aware that the cars have changed size a good deal over the last 30 years. And I know nothing whatsoever about any recommendations or stipulations about the size of a parking space. I know that my garage would fit a Morris 1000 very nicely, but a present-day car, not so much. So I'm wondering about these 19 parking spaces.
So there are space standards that need to be adhered to, including the width and the length. We will comply with those. There is enough space at the front. I appreciate you don't see it on plan, but 19 dwellings just about accommodates parking from the front aspect. That includes disabled access and electric charging points. So it can be catered for. It's just a question that needs to be worked out, particularly with the landscaping as we go into more detailed design, is that relationship between coming out to your property to have car parking, defensible space, and then usable space. You've got to be mindful, as I said, you've got the park and the terrace, but the idea is that, you know, we want to get
A space is roughly 5 by 2.5, roughly, I think.
About that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you have 2.4 by 4.8, but then you've got disabled access spaces or wheelchair spaces, which are larger. So, I mean, they've got bigger, certainly, but we're designing to current standards, which are sufficient for what's on the road at the moment, although, you know, things get bigger almost every year.
Hi, I'm Judy Gibbons. I'm really delighted to hear of this proposal and that you might save this building and really elevate the top of Richmond Hill and provide these beautiful homes. But as your planning experts, or I know one of you is, I've always been completely perplexed as to how somebody could have bought this building, I don't know when it was, 15 or 20 years ago, and how they would have been allowed to let it deteriorate in the way it has, to the detriment of the building and history and the community. and the fact that I'm assuming that the council and English Heritage and other people have no jurisdiction over the owners to force them to do anything. So perhaps you can explain how that happens.
I'll just do the sort of the bit where we got involved in the project, talk about the technicalities. Yeah, I mean, we saw it probably 2.5 years ago now, and I couldn't believe what a state it was in and how it got to that point. Now, I know the Coldwell group as well. They explained to me what happened and various other different people, so that sort of made a little bit of sense. But I mean, the problem is, it's been going since about 1960, the decay. It's only the tin roof that's stopping it. But I mean, there is a process of enforcement, which...
Yeah, so I mean, you have to appreciate, we've now started having a pre-op discussions with the local authority. That's not only just planning, that's heritage, that's design, that's also enforcement. So we've opened the front door, so to speak, so they are fully aware. What we've got is their support and goodwill to bring forward a scheme. That's the process we're in. If something did not happen, the council would then take charge to say, well, look, we've shown the extent of the deterioration. It would then be up to the local authority, because we've shown them, to then act upon that to do it. But at present, because we're looking to fix it, future-proof it, they're going to try and work with us in order to create a viable, feasible scheme that all parties are happy with.
I think it's best described as an Englishman or Englishwoman's castle home is his or her castle. So basically, although councils do have powers, they're very reluctant to exercise them, because if they can't recover the money from the owner who's been served with an enforcement order, council has to stump up. And I'm sure the councillors sitting here will probably say they haven't got the money. Any more questions? Lady in orange.
It's a very short question. So, I mean, all in all, it sounds like a great scheme, good to be doing something, multiple occupancy. Can you say anything about the likely affordability of the units when they eventually go on the market?
Sorry, it wasn't terribly clear.
Okay, I'll just say...
I think I got it. I think it was about...
What's the likely affordability of the properties when they eventually go on the market? And obviously, you're investing a lot.
Well, it's probably worth giving you a range then of the answer there. The smaller one is circa 800,000, and the really large ones are about 3 million. The average is probably about 2.4 million across the gallery houses. It blends a bit, but the average is about 1,650, 1,700.
Right, lady in black.
Just with regard to the streetscape, when you stand in front of Doughty House, you see Doughty House, and then you see the cottage to the right. Forgive me for not being able to read your visualizations very well, but you're putting this glass extension. What do you, in the front, I believe, what are you going to see? How is the streetscape changed as you're standing on the road? And second question, although it's not a public area, so we won't be seeing it, just looking at your visualizations again, you had quite a sympathetic and somewhat classical thing with the gallery, and then you had a wing, which I guess is the houses or flats or whatever, but it was rather harsh. Was there any thought to making it a little bit more, although one can be modern, a little bit more, sort of getting a little of the nuances of what the thing you're trying to, rather than, sometimes just stark modern works, but it looked a little bit
well, it's
carbuncly.
If we deal with the questions in reverse order, the images that Phil put up there before, they're sort of placeholders in a way. I mean, this design has to be a lot more refined with the council. We've got a modern because it's a juxtaposition. We didn't want to do a pastiche of the old gallery, but it's far from finalised. In terms, I think the other question was about the conservatory. I mean, what's going back there is what was there up until about 1940-something when it burnt down. So it'll be in the same shape as that old picture.
So from the streetscape, looking at that, you will not see Doughty Cottage, Doughty
That's right. Yep.
You'll get a glimpse,
Yeah,
but
you'll
it will be substantially obscured by the conservatory, the new conservatory building in essentially the same position as that, as the historic one. So, but I haven't got exactly the right angle, but you'll still be aware of its presence and you'll get a glimpse view. And as I say, it's got a quirky facade, and that will be visible as people go along the lane, which gives you access to the courtyard, but also you'll get a glimpse of that from the street. So it will be less prominent, certainly, but it will still be visible to some degree. But it's not going to be. It's going to be behind the conservatory. Just going back, I take your point. These are really sketches to start those questions with ourselves about what we might develop as an architectural response, and it's a prompt for us as well. But I appreciate your comments back. It's unfinished business. Yeah.
Any more questions? Right. Well, as you went here, I did ask the three of them before the event started how they felt if I carried out a straw poll. And they, sharp intake of breath, but they gamely have agreed that that's what we should do. It has absolutely no effect whatsoever. It is purely for interest's sake, because this is only a selection of the members of the Richmond Society, and there are probably people who aren't members of the Richmond Society. But on the basis of what you've heard, and bearing in mind that this needs refining significantly, as has been said, if you're broadly in favour of turning Doughty House from a single mansion, or single occupation mansion, into multi-occupation as outlined, put your paws up. And those against? Right, one's declared against, I think, and there probably are a few undecided. Sorry? Yes, obviously these things have to be considered in more detail, and as I say, it was a bit of fun, but for interest for their benefit, but also for ours. If I could borrow the clicker for a minute.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I think it's always quite brave when developers come and face the burghers of Richmond. I think the last time I organised something like this was for what was House of Fraser, and that was quite a riotous meeting by Richmond standards. I didn't tell them that. So I think we should thank them for giving up their time to come and talk to us. They've said they're very happy to stay afterwards, and downstairs there is wine and soft drinks, which probably everybody's gasping for. So please thank our speakers. And the next meeting, or the next event of the Society is the bus tour on Peter Hendy's Route Master, which I believe is going up Richmond Hill, which is quite a feat, because if you think of the size of a double-decker Route Master going up Richmond Hill, that's a challenge for any driver. And it's on July the 17th, and supper's included in the price of the ticket. And the last thing for me is, you probably are all aware that every year the Richmond Society has an awards ceremony. And we give awards, which are those big round ceramic things, or commendations to projects in Richmond that have, broadly speaking, enhanced the quality of life. So they can be buildings, they can be refurbishments, they can be things like tree seats or whatever. So if you've got any ideas and you'd like to nominate something, please get in touch with your thoughts. And on that note, thank you for coming out on a very sticky evening, and come downstairs. And last but not least, I have something for our speakers, and then you're free to go downstairs.
Well, thank you very much.
Very much.
Completely unexpected.
Dinner. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh,
nice.
Oh, fantastic.
Thank you. That's very kind.
No, thank you
pleasure.
for that.
No, it's